So I want you to think for a second about, the last time you went to a networking event.
Oh, man. You're probably standing in some mildly uncomfortable conference room, right?
Exactly. You're standing there, you hand out some contact info, maybe you connect with a few people on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and you have these really polite, highly curated conversations about, what you do for a living.
Right. And we call that building a network. But it's very clean, it's very transactional, and honestly, it is incredibly fragile.
Oh, for sure. I mean, one missed email or one job change, and the connection is basically gone.
Totally gone.
Uh,
Now, I want you to contrast that fragile web with the concept of a truly shared life, like a community so deeply rooted and impenetrable that people actually view each other's problems, their debts, their joys. They view all of that as their own.
which, I mean, feels almost foreign today, doesn't it? It feels like a completely different paradigm.
It really does.
Because we've engineered a society that is, well, brilliantly connected digitally, yet we are constantly tracking these massive epidemics of loneliness.
Yeah, it's a huge paradox.
Right. We have massive networks, but we lack deeply rooted communities. And figuring out the mechanics of how to build that kind of unshakable connection is arguably one of the most pressing sociological challenges we face right now.
Which is exactly our mission for today's deep dive. We are exploring the hidden mechanics of deep human connection.
And we have some really interesting source material for this.
We do. To do this, we are looking at a fascinating 2025 sermon transcript. It's titled A Place Where We Are Connected, and it was delivered by Pastor Yasushi Nomoto at Kahului Union Church on Maui.
Yeah, and just to give some context, it's structured around a specific biblical text.
Right, I should set the stage for you, the listener. This address is structured around the book of Acts, chapter 2, verses 42 through 47, which outlines the behaviors of the very early Christian church.
But we aren't just doing a theological review here.
No, not at all. Our goal today is to look at this text through a sociological and philosophical lens. We are using this ancient historical record combined with Pastor Nomoto's modern observations as kind of the ultimate case study in how impenetrable communities are actually built.
It's a really unique way to look at it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the contrast between our modern networking habits and the radical connection described here is just staggering.
It is a staggering contrast. But what makes this specific analysis so compelling is that, well, it doesn't immediately drag us back 2,000 years.
Right, he starts in the present day.
Exactly. Pastor Nomoto starts by laying out the standard, almost mechanical progression of how we naturally form relationships today. It's a sequence we all intuitively recognize, but we rarely actually dissect it.
Yeah, it's a very linear progression. So first, you meet someone.
That's step one.
Then, as you spend time together, that physical or emotional distance shrinks. And as you get to know each other better, the nature of your conversations shifts, right? You stop talking about the weather or, I don't know, local sports, and you start talking about real life.
Right, the stakes get a little higher.
Exactly. Then, when difficulties arise, you step in and help each other out. And finally, through that crucible of shared difficulty, deep trust is built.
And, I mean, that makes perfect logical sense.
It does.
But Pastor Nomoto shares a bit of his own personal background to reveal kind of a major flaw in relying purely on that linear model.
Oh, right, because he moved around a lot.
Yeah, he mentions that he moved around quite a bit as a child. And because of that constant uprooting, he developed this survival skill of sorts, the ability to naturally blend into new environments.
Which is super useful.
It is. He describes himself as naturally friendly, so relationship building comes somewhat easily to him. But he adds a massive caveat here.
What's the caveat?
That ease is entirely based on his specific personality and his practiced circumstances. For a huge portion of the population, navigating that linear progression from just saying hello to reaching deep trust is an immense, sometimes insurmountable struggle.
Wow, yeah. That personality dependency is such a massive hurdle. I mean, if community only works for extroverts, it's not a real community.
Exactly. It leaves so many people behind.
But he points to a really beautiful modern example of people bypassing some of that awkwardness. He talks about this unique pandemic fellowship that emerged on Maui.
Oh, this part was so interesting.
Yeah. Because indoor gatherings were heavily restricted, their community moved outdoors. They started gathering at Cove Beach Park in Kihei.
Just right out there on the beach.
Right on the beach. People would bring their surfboards, hang out in the ocean up to 3 times a week, share meals in these small homes, and spend hours just laughing together. He notes that it felt almost like an extended summer camp.
What's fascinating here is that this Maui beach gathering represents the absolute pinnacle of natural proximity-based bonding.
Yeah, it sounds amazing.
It's idyllic. You have a shared beautiful environment, a shared physical activity in surfing, and consistent, frequent contact. It forces people out of their isolated routines.
I call that the summer camp effect. You take a group of people, you strip away their normal daily distractions, put them in close physical proximity with a shared activity, and they just force a fast, intense bond.
Right, it's just basic sociology.
But then the sermon completely challenges the idea that this is the ultimate goal. Pastor Nemoto argues that while the beach was a wonderful natural fellowship, true biblical fellowship requires a depth that goes far beyond just the summer camp effect.
Which is a pretty bold claim.
It is, and that begs the question, if surfing 3 times a week and eating dinner together isn't the ceiling for human connection, what is?
Well, to find that out, we have to leave the beaches of modern Maui and look at the historical anomaly of the early church.
Back to the book of Acts.
Right. The text in Acts chapter 2 serves as the original blueprint for this deeper model. And what is absolutely vital to understand about this first century setting is what they didn't have.
Okay, what were they missing?
In Acts 2.42, there are no church buildings. There are no modern organizational systems. There are no structured programs, no marketing budgets, and definitely no administrative hierarchies.
So no org charts, no strategic planning committees trying to, optimize engagement.
None of that.
Mhm.
They just met in people's small homes and in public courtyards.
That is so wild to think about today.
It really is. And Pastor Niboto frames this using the concept of the family table.
I love this concept.
Think about the psychology of a family table. Its value has absolutely nothing to do with whether the table is made of expensive mahogany or if you're eating off fine china.
Right, the furniture doesn't matter.
Exactly. The meaning is derived entirely from the atmosphere created when people who inherently belong to one another simply sit together. It's raw, it's structurally simple, but it carries immense psychological weight.
Okay, I love the idea of the family table, but let me push back on this a little bit.
Sure, go for it.
In our modern world, we are completely obsessed with systems. We want optimization. We build complex structures because, frankly, human beings are messy and structures keep things from falling apart.
That's very true.
So is it really possible to build an unshakable community on something as simple and unmanaged as a family table vibe? Like, without rigid systems, doesn't a group of diverse people just devolve into tribalism and total chaos?
That is the exact tension that makes the early church such a fascinating sociological study. By all human logic, you're right, it should have devolved into chaos.
Right, it makes no sense.
The reason it didn't wasn't because they had brilliant managers. It was because of their unifying foundation. Pastor Niboto references Ephesians chapter 2 to explain this mechanism.
Okay, how does that work?
For these early believers, the shared reality of the cross and the resurrection of Christ acted as a definitive historical event that completely shattered societal dividing walls.
Yeah, the transcript specifically highlights that this shared belief, quote unquote, put hostility to death. It brought Jews and Gentiles together into one single family.
And we really need to pause and grasp the historical magnitude of that hostility.
It was intense.
It was beyond intense.
Yeah.
In the ancient world, the ingrained prejudice between Jews and Gentiles wasn't just a mild cultural disagreement. It was visceral, systemic, and religiously mandated segregation.
Wow.
There were literal walls in the temple complex separating them, with signs warning outsiders that crossing meant death. They were completely separate worlds that despised each other.
That's a huge divide to bridge.
Exactly. But this new shared belief system functioned as an ultimate explosive equalizer. It psychologically overrode centuries of deeply entrenched prejudice.
Okay, I see where this is going.
So, addressing your pushback about systems, they didn't need a rigid institutional program to hold them together because their unifying foundation was vastly heavier than their differences. The shared reality of their faith was stronger than any management structure they could have invented.
Okay, that makes sense. If you experience an earthquake together, you don't care about the political affiliation of the guy helping you out of the rubble. The shared foundation overrides the prejudice.
That's a perfect analogy.
But that's the why they gathered. What about the how? How did they maintain that intensity on a random Tuesday a year later?
Yeah, the day-to-day grind.
Right. A family table is a great concept, but practically, spending that much time with people usually breeds resentment. How did they not just drive each other crazy?
They maintained it through a very specific daily practice that fundamentally altered their behavior. Keep in mind, The New Testament didn't exist yet as a compiled book,
Oh, true.
so their learning dynamic was totally different from what we picture today. They were taking the ancient Jewish texts, the Psalms, the prophets, and reading them through an entirely new lens. Those who were knowledgeable would guide the others in understanding.
But the crucial distinction Pastor Nemeto makes is that this learning was never allowed to remain purely intellectual.
Exactly. It wasn't just a book club.
Right. It wasn't about sitting in a courtyard, taking mental notes, and then going home to your isolated life. Obeying what they learned fundamentally dictated their daily physical actions.
Yes.
Like when they engaged in breaking bread, it wasn't just a casual potluck to grab some calories. It was a deliberate, highly symbolic act of remembering that shared foundation we just talked about.
And that deliberate remembrance translated directly into how they handled each other's burdens. In this specific community, the modern concept of, I don't know you, or that's your problem, literally ceased to exist.
It just wasn't an option.
You couldn't say that to someone sitting at your family table. They weren't just sharing time, like you might at a networking event or even surfing at the beach. They were sharing life. Their finances, their struggles, their daily sustenance were all intertwined.
Which brings us to one of the most vivid and powerful analogies in this entire deep dive, the charcoal effect.
Oh, this is such a good visual.
It really is. Pastor Nemoto compares this level of community to a pile of burning coals. If you take a single burning coal, no matter how intensely hot it is, and you separate it from the pile with a pair of tongs, it will rapidly lose its heat.
It just dies out.
Within minutes, it turns cold and gray. But when you gather all those coals together in a tight pile, they share their heat, they keep each other burning, and the fire sustains itself.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of human psychology, the charcoal analogy completely obliterates the idea that community is a passive state.
Yeah, you can't just be a spectator.
Exactly. You don't just join a community, check a box on a membership form, and suddenly reap the benefits. Maintaining an unshakable connection requires constant, intentional physical proximity.
It takes actual work.
It requires friction and shared energy to keep the heat alive. If you pull away to isolate yourself, you don't just weaken the community, you actually extinguish your own heat.
I love that phrasing from the sermon. He says, biblical fellowship is not simply about longevity. It is about sharing the heat.
That's a powerful way to frame it.
So for you listening to this right now, it forces a deeply confronting question. Who is in your charcoal pile? Are you just standing near people at work or in your neighborhood, or are you actually sharing heat with them?
And if a group actually manages to achieve that charcoal level warmth, the environment it produces is incredibly unique.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because you'd think the metric for a healthy community is just everyone smiling and agreeing all the time.
Right. Zero conflict.
Yeah, but Pastor Nemoto offers a brilliant, highly counterintuitive metric for measuring psychological safety and deep trust. He shares an anecdote about a couple in his congregation, the Takases.
It's a fantastic observation of human behavior. So the wife, Mizu, plays the piano for the church. And apparently there are times when she essentially has to carry the musical weight of the entire orchestra all by herself.
Which sounds terrifying.
This is a heavy, stressful burden.
Yeah.
And she jokingly says to another woman, Mariko, you're lucky you only have to play the melody.
On the surface, if you hear that, it just sounds like a funny little quip between friends.
Just a throwaway comment.
Exactly. But Pastor Nemoto pauses the sermon to deeply analyze the psychology behind that joke. He points out that the ability to make a comment like that, to playfully tease someone about their lighter workload without causing deep offense or sparking a defensive argument, is actually a massive indicator of profound trust.
And if you think about that in a modern corporate context, it makes perfect sense.
Oh, completely.
In a fragile network or a highly competitive workplace, a comment like that could spark a huge conflict or get you called into HR.
For sure. People are on edge.
Because people are inherently insecure about their roles. They feel unappreciated. They read negative subtext into every single interaction. But in a truly secure community, a joke safely remains a joke.
Why is that, though?
Because the baseline trust is so incredibly deep that everyone inherently knows they are valued. There is radical psychological safety.
He notes that because of this deep trust, each person can confidently fulfill their unique role. You don't have to carry the entire burden alone, the way Mizu sometimes has to carry the orchestra. You are part of a larger, trusted symphony.
And that internal health directly connects to the external outcome described in the text of Acts 2.46 and 47.
What does that text say?
Well, when a community operates like a trusted orchestra, where people are carrying each other's burdens, sharing life, and feeling completely secure, it produces undeniable outward fruit. The historical record notes that this early group gained favor with all the people.
Oh, wow. So people outside noticed.
Yes, the community wasn't an exclusive, inward-facing bunker hiding from the world. The harmony they created was so incredibly rare and attractive that it naturally drew outsiders in. The fellowship inherently spreads.
It's the ultimate anti-click. It's strong enough to relentlessly protect its members, but open and secure enough to positively influence the entire surrounding society.
It's a beautiful balance.
So look at the journey we've taken here. We've gone from the natural bonding of surfers on a Maui beach to the prejudice-shattering power of the ancient family table to the heat-sharing necessity of the charcoal pile, and now to this beautiful orchestra of trust.
There's a lot of ground to cover.
It is. So to synthesize how we actually build this today, Pastor Nemoto concludes with a practical blueprint. He calls it the 6 C's of the church. Let's dig into these because they represent the structural building blocks for everything we've been discussing.
Yeah, the first 4 C's basically lay the groundwork. First, you have communication, which he defines not just as chatting, but as sharing the core foundational truth, sharing the word.
Okay, got it.
Second is connection, which is the actual physical and emotional act of being intimately tied to one another.
Proximity.
Right. Third is conversation, and it's vital to note the difference here. This isn't broadcasting information. This is defined as sharing hearts through dialogue, actively moving beyond surface-level chatter into actual vulnerability.
That's a huge step.
It is. And fourth is commitment, which is the conscious, gritty decision to continue showing up, to deliberately stay in that charcoal pile even when you're tired.
Okay, so those first four make total sense, but then we hit the 5th C, and this completely stopped me in my tracks.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
The fifth mandatory building block of a healthy community is conflicts. Pastor Nemoto explicitly highlights that even in the most perfect, loving community, conflicts are completely unavoidable.
It's just human nature.
I just find it absolutely fascinating to see conflict listed as a required structural component rather than as a symptom of community failure. Like, we usually view friction as the thing that destroys a network, not the thing that builds it.
This raises an important question, doesn't it?
It really does.
How on earth can conflict be a building block? And the answer to that lies entirely in the sixth and final C, which Pastor Nemoto identifies as Christ.
The anchor.
Exactly. Looking at this sociologically, this sixth element represents the ultimate shared anchor. If you introduce conflict, the 5th C, into a group that lacks an ultimate unifying anchor, the group will inevitably fracture and destroy itself.
Yeah, the individual egos and differences will quickly outweigh that superficial connection.
Yep.
The charcoal scatters, the heat dies.
Precisely. But with that immovable anchor holding the absolute center of the group, the fellowship doesn't shatter when conflict inevitably hits.
It forces them to work through it.
Yes. Surviving that friction together is exactly what generates that radical psychological safety we saw in the piano player anecdote. Enduring unavoidable conflicts and coming out the other side still committed to one another is what proves to the human brain that the community is actually real.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
It forces the transition from a fragile, polite network into an unshakable family. Pastor Nemoto closes with a quote from 1 Corinthians 12:26 that perfectly captures the reality of this interconnectedness. He says, "If one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices with it."
If one part suffers, every part suffers with it. Think about how radical that is. That is the absolute antithesis of the modern mantra, "That's your problem, not mine."
It turns that idea completely upside down.
What an incredible, challenging journey this deep dive has been. I mean, we started by looking at how beautiful natural environments like the beaches of Kihei can foster great camaraderie and that summer camp effect.
Which is great, but not the end goal.
Right. We quickly saw that to build something truly impenetrable, you need infinitely more than shared hobbies. You need a foundation so heavy it crushes deep-seated historical prejudices. You need a real family table.
You need to share life, not just time.
Exactly. You need the daily, intentional, sometimes exhausting friction of the charcoal pile where you are actively sharing your heat. And you need an environment of trust so profound that individuals can play their unique instruments in the orchestra without fear, knowing that even when unavoidable conflicts arise, the anchor will hold them firmly together.
It's a tall order, but it's possible.
It is. So I will ask you, the listener, one more time. Evaluate the heat in your own circles today. Are you merely sharing your time with people, or are you actually ready to share your life?
And as you think about how to apply that, consider this final thought.
What's that?
If a truly unbreakable community explicitly requires us to endure unavoidable conflicts and to physically actively share each other's heat, what is happening to our modern, highly curated digital networks?
Oh, wow.
We spend immense amounts of energy engineering our lives to avoid all friction. We block people we disagree with, we mute annoying voices, we curate comfortable echo chamber bubbles.
That's entirely how the internet works
Right.
now.
Right. So by technologically removing all that discomfort, are we accidentally starving ourselves of the very conflicts and friction required to build deep, enduring trust?
That is a phenomenal question to leave on. The friction we're running from might just be the fire we're desperately looking for. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. The next time you hand out a business card or click Add Connection online, ask yourself if you're just building a fragile network or if you're finally ready to share a life. Catch you next time.